Well, hello and good evening, and welcome to the When Words Collide. This is normally an event that is held in person in Calgary, Alberta, and this is normally an exciting event that helps kick off the annual When Words Collide conference, and it normally takes place in conjunction with the awesome folks at the Calgary Public Library. Now, my name is Mark Leslie Lefebvre, and I'm going to be your host and MC for this evening, and I'm located in Waterloo, Ontario. Now, I would like to first acknowledge that the land on which I stand in Waterloo, Ontario, are the lands traditionally used by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. And I'd like to acknowledge that the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. We're all treaty people with a responsibility to honor all of our relations. And I'm honored to be here to introduce to you some of these amazing guests of honor who are part of the When Words Collide Festival. Now, the When Words Collide is an annual conference, as I said, that takes place every year in Calgary, Alberta. It is virtual due to the pandemic, but we're doing our best to bring this to you. And one of the benefits you, dear viewer, have is you can watch this from wherever in the world you are. And if you're not watching it live, you can still enjoy these wonderful readings from these awesome guests of honor. Now, due to some strangeness related to time zones and schedules and all the stuff that was going on, because many of our guests of honor were teaching virtual workshops today and maybe just wrapping up the virtual workshop. So I may not have everyone in the back door studio with me. In a regular event, we might say they were potentially caught in traffic, but if they appear, they will come up on stage. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce each of our guests. I'm going to introduce them and then bring them onto the stage, and then I'm going to go hide backstage while we get to enjoy their reading. If there's any comments you want to leave, go ahead and leave those. As they wrap up their talk reading, I'll pop up comments from the live audience. And at the very, very end, we'll bring everyone back on stage in case there's any final questions, things we want to discuss before we take our final bow. So thanks again for joining us. I am going to start off by introducing you to the very first guest of honor, which is Cathy Ace. And I'm going to read her bio for her before I bring Cathy up onto the stage. Now, Cathy Ace was born and raised in Wales, migrating to Canada at the age of 40, where she turned her back on the previous life in marketing and turned to a life of crime fiction. She's the author of the 10 Cat Morgan mysteries, which are traditional Christie-style mysteries, 4 Wise Inquiries agency mysteries, which are cozy, quintessentially British mysteries, and in 2019, the standalone psychological suspense novel, The Wrong Boy, which became an Amazon #1 bestseller and won an IPPY award. It was shortlisted for the Bonnie Blythe Award for Best Canadian Light Mystery 3 times across both her series. She won in 2015 for The Corpse with the Platinum Hair. She's published 2 collections of short stories and novellas and has been shortlisted for the Arthur Ellis Award for Best Short Story. She was chair of the Crime Writers of Canada from 2016 to 2018. Her latest release is The Corpse with the Iron Will, the 10th Cat Morgan mystery, which is set in British Columbia in a location inspired by Cathy's own rural neighborhood. So I'm going to play a little bit, and when the bit is finished, Cathy will be on stage with me. Cathy, welcome to the stage.
Hello, it's lovely to be here.
It's great to have you. Now, I'm just going to go hide backstage while everyone gets to enjoy what you're going to treat us with.
Oh, okie dokie then. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Mark. Hello, folks. How the devil are you? Well, I hope. My name's Cathy Ace, as advertised. And yes, you heard that I'm from Wales. So yes, this is still a Welsh accent. I'm going to hang on to it for as long as I can. As Mark said, I'm the author of the Kate Morgan mysteries, the Wise Inquiries agency mysteries, and that dark psychological suspense novel that stands alone. And when it came time to decide what to read and share with you this evening, I couldn't decide what to read. So I thought I'd like to go back to the beginning. Julie Andrews tells us the beginning's a very good place to start. But in my case, that would mean going back to short stories. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go back to the first Kate Morgan mystery, The Corpse with the Silver Tongue. Next March, it will be 10 years since that book was published. So I'm coming up to a big anniversary, and I'm pleased to say that at the moment, there's a wonderful screenwriter whose name I'm not allowed to share with you, who is working on the screenplay for the 2-hour television movie that's going to be made of The Corpse with the Silver Tongue, which will be the first in the recurring movie series of the Kate Morgan mysteries. So it's very much front and center in my mind, and I hope you enjoy it. I think it's also a good way to kick off. This is an introduction to a character. It's an introduction to a setting. So in terms of this being my first traditionally published novel, here you go. I'm going to start at the beginning and keep going until I run out of time. That's basically it. I hope you enjoy it. The Corpse with the Silver Tongue, the first Kate Morgan mystery. The chatter among the dinner guests was bubbling along nicely when Alistair Townsend suddenly clutched at his chest, made gurgling sounds, and slumped into his bowl of escargot. Reactions around the table varied. His wife told him to stop messing about. One of his guests looked surprised, one a little concerned, and a couple were quite cross. All of which led me to suspect that how to react when one's host drops dead at the dinner table is not tackled in any modern etiquette books. I was the only one who leapt up, rushed to Alistair's side, and shouted that someone should call an ambulance. Silly of me, really. Any fool could have seen he was dead before his face hit the garlic butter. I felt I had to do something because everyone else was glued to their seats, agreeing with Tamsin Townsend that her husband was putting on some sort of attention-seeking show for us all. Gerard Fontainebleau was the first to pick up on my concerns, and he moved to the telephone as quickly as his bowed octogenarian legs would carry him. He barked instructions into the instrument, requesting that action be taken. The seriousness of the situation only gradually dawned upon the rest of the group. Admittedly, my first thought upon seeing Alistair's rather alarming face plant into the snails was heart attack. Alistair was over 60, overweight, and overindulgent. He smoked several fat cigars each day and apparently thought that exercise consisted of meandering from one bar on Nice's famous Promenade des Anglais to another. He was the personification of a heart attack waiting to happen. Now it seemed the waiting was over. When Alistair's ethereally blonde 28-year-old trophy wife Tamsin finally realized that her husband wasn't messing about and was in fact dead, she began to act very oddly. Trust me, I'm a criminology professor, so I have a pretty good idea of what constitutes odd under these circumstances. Everyone acts and reacts differently to a sudden death, of course, but what she did took even me by surprise, which takes some doing. She rushed from the table and returned moments later with a bunch of smouldering twigs in her hand, which she proceeded to waggle around her late husband's body to ease the path for his departing soul, she said. She chanted to some ancient gods with guttural names as she brushed evil spirits toward the open windows with the smoking twigs. See what I mean? Understandably, my fellow guests removed themselves rapidly from their seats and scuttled away from the table. Before dinner, we'd all gathered on the large balcony that led off the apartment to admire the view of red-roofed old Nice below us and the glittering Mediterranean beyond. Now the balcony offered an attractive alternative to sitting in a room with a corpse. Not a difficult choice, I suppose. Given that the only person I'd known at the table before the party was now slumped dead in his chair, I hesitated before making any suggestions about what we should do, while sadly waiting for the sadly unnecessary attendance of the paramedics. But I know from experience that at such a time someone has to take charge. Does anyone know if we're supposed to call the police too? I thought I'd better check. I know only too well what happens in the event of an unexpected death in Britain, my old home, and in Canada, my new one. As a visitor to Nice, I wasn't sure if we needed to make an extra call or if the French police would automatically show up along with the ambulance. We will not require the police, Professor Morgan, replied Madeleine Shafina in her delightfully formal English. I gathered from the introductions over pre-dinner drinks that Madame Shafino had been a lawyer in Cannes for decades, and that one pronounced her name Shafino. Now over 90, she was a frail, bent woman, but she managed to maintain a dignified air despite the unnatural darkness of her hair. Please, it's Kate. Away from my academic life at the University of Vancouver, I don't much care for Professor. It makes me feel like some crusty old has-been who decorates her office walls with diplomas and degrees. I'm not crusty. I don't think that 48 is old, and I like to think that my best is yet to come. However, I do have my degrees hanging on my walls. In my defense, it's the sort of thing students expect. We will not require the police, Kate, said Madeleine Shafino, smiling and nodding. Her dark, intelligent eyes twinkled quite cheerfully, given the morbid circumstances. I have tell them to send the police, announced Gerard Fontainebleau gravely as he joined us on the balcony. His weathered complexion and gnarled hands bore testament to his almost 70 years of tending the gardens that surrounded the Palais du Bel-France, where we were all gathered. Madeleine tutted and rolled her eyes as Chuck Damcott snapped, Madeleine says we don't need the police, Gerard. He sounded cross, impatient with the old gardener, unfairly, I thought. A tall, slim, sandy-haired American in his late 40s, Chuck Damcott had been living in Nice for 10 years. Our host had seated him next to me at dinner. After all, why wouldn't an American spy novelist now living in France and a Welsh criminology professor now living in Canada get along? To be fair, we hadn't had a bad evening until Alistair had dropped dead, of course. Chuck had been attempting to entertain me with stories about how the Palais de Belle-France had been Gestapo headquarters for the area during the Vichy years. He'd apparently been delighted to be able to buy an apartment there, it being so well known among World War II espionage aficionados. Odd though the topic had been, he'd been engaging and almost charming in his childlike enthusiasm. His rather acid rebuff of the aged gardener was, therefore, all the more unexpected. By way of a reply, Gerard Fontainebleau shrugged slowly. When he spoke, it was disdainfully. Whatever Madame Shafino might say, it is better to have the police. Otherwise, they will think we do something wrong. Monsieur Townsend, he is English and he's rich. There will be an investigation. Gerard spoke with all the authority that his presence at the Palais allowed. If you think so, Gerard, was Madeleine Shafino's polite yet curt reply. All through drinks and dinner, I'd noticed the body language between these two. They didn't like each other, and they weren't new to the emotion. Dr. Benino Brunetti was the next to offer an opinion. His rich Italian baritone made Chuck Damcott's eye register sound positively nasal. I too think it is better to call the police. Alistair's death is a shock, but we have our reputations to consider. Benny, as he jovially insisted we call him, was the head of the nearby Cimier Museum of Roman Antiquities. Somewhere in his mid-50s, he possessed perfect English, perfect white teeth, perfect olive skin, and probably, knowing my luck, a perfect wife. He was obviously well educated, as well as charming, witty, and heart-achingly good-looking, with dark eyes that bored into your very soul. Well, they bored into mine anyway. But Benny, cooed Madeleine, it is clear that Monsieur Townsend has suffered a heart attack. It was not unexpected. He was an unhealthy man. Madame Shafino was echoing my own initial thoughts, but she was doing so with all the coquettish charm that a woman in her 90s could muster. Benny Brunetti smiled graciously. I suspected he must have grown accustomed to women of all ages batting their eyelashes at him. What do you mean, Madeleine? Alistair was hale and hearty, Chuck Damcott whined, as though he'd suffered a personal slight. He loved his life here in France and took an interest in everything around him. Why, he initiated the whole idea of the swimming pool just so he and Tamsin could exercise right here at the Palais without having to go to one of the local hotels. The swimming pool, Madeleine hissed angrily at the American. I'd caught something earlier on about a swimming pool that was about to be dug into Gerard Fontainebleau's beloved gardens, but the topic had been abandoned at Tamsin Townsend's request. She'd said that it was too divisive for her birthday dinner. Frankly, I'd been surprised at the time that she'd even known the word existed. Alistair hadn't dropped the subject without making a final snide remark about good things coming to those who won't wait. Typical of Alistair, of course. Selfish bugger. He always had to have the last word. As I looked out again over the city beneath me and the sea beyond, I wondered whether I was even sorry that he'd died. I know they say you shouldn't speak ill of the dead, but I'd never had a good word to say about Alistair when he'd been alive, so it would have been hypocritical of me to start now that he was gone. It was best to say nothing. You see, before I'd gone off to get my master's degree in criminal psychology, I'd worked at the London advertising agency that Alistair had owned. He'd certainly earned his industry-wide reputation as a pompous bombast who specialised in finding timid clients with huge budgets. Clients who could be talked into spending more than was really needed on a campaign. Somehow, he'd also managed to coax great work out of several of the most famous creative prima donnas in the business. So his agency didn't just have huge billings, it also had an awe-inspiring array of creative awards from around the world. I'd worked there for a few years, but honestly, I'd hated the man. No one says you actually have to like the person who pays his salary, do they? And I could quite happily have lived the rest of my life without seeing his florid face ever again. Which was why I'd been so dismayed when he'd unexpectedly accosted me as I was relaxing outside a bar in Nice's beautiful Cours Soleil earlier that very day. Good heavens, it's Kate Morgan! He'd cried out so loudly that everyone relaxing at the bar had turned to look at us. What brings you here? I expect you're surprised to see me. What? Surprised? I was speechless, a condition which for me might last a whole second. I'd closed my eyes, hoping I was imagining the whole thing, but when I opened them again, he was still there, beaming, effervescing with fake bonhomie. Hello, Alistair. I sighed and resigned myself to his unwanted presence. How are you? Like I cared. Top hole. I'd forgotten he did that. Talked like some Hollywood version of an oldie English squire. What brings you to our fair Côte d'Azur, eh? He quipped with a wink. Ugh. I've been presenting a paper on the psychology of internet fraud to an international symposium here. I'm a criminologist now. I must have sounded as though I was apologising, which was annoying because I was presenting a paper at an international symposium. It's a big deal. Oh, jolly nice, had been his irritatingly patronising reply. I felt my shoulders hunch with annoyance and I slurped at my rosé wine, which no longer seemed refreshing but necessary. Will you be with us for long? Alistair seemed to imply that my visit to Nice was all about him. Again, typical. I leave on Tuesday, I said before I could stop myself. Ah, so you'll have the whole weekend with us. Marvellous. Not if I can help it, I thought. Oh, sweet Kate, he cooed as he insinuated his flabby body, uninvited, into the chair next to me. You were always one of my most valued employees. Most valued, he'd lied. I was bereft when you departed for pastures new. I could never imagine why. And then there was all that terrible trouble you had in Cambridge. Oh, dear me, yes, Cambridge. There it was. That was why he remembered me. He couldn't remember a thing about all the hours I'd put in for our clients, all the boring press stories I'd written, all the successful campaigns I'd managed, all the money I'd made for him. Oh, no. If my face hadn't been plastered on the front page of every British tabloid accused of viciously slaying my boyfriend, he'd never have remembered me at all. But I wondered if he remembered that, or if he only... Of course, I'd never been charged. I was completely cleared. But I wondered if he remembered that, or if he only recalled the lurid mudslinging that the journalists had seemed to think was investigative reporting. And that's my 15 minutes up. So you know what? If you want to know more about what happened when Kate was there when Alistair died and whether she might become a suspect, you'll have to buy the book.
I'm talking and my mic is muted and nobody can hear me. So all they see is the gestures going on. I was going to say, and you can buy the book. You can find out where to buy it over at cathyace.com. Thank you, Cathy. And thanks for making the gesture that said, I can't hear. Your lips are moving. I don't know what you're saying, Mark. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. I am going to move on. I am just realizing I just messaged the other guests when I scheduled this. I scheduled it for because I'm in the Eastern time zone. I'm in Ontario, and When Words Collide takes place in Mountain Time, and I had scheduled this for what was 6 p.m. Mountain Time, 8 p.m. Eastern, and then I just had a pop-up reminder that that maybe it was supposed to start at 7, and maybe we've started early, but that's okay. We're going to roll with it because we're awesome. We're professional authors. We can handle this. And thank you, Cathy. That was a fantastic,
Thank you.
reading. So I'm going to pop Cathy back down off stage, and I'm going to introduce the next guest. The next guest that I have is going to be Stina Holmes. So I'm going to bring up her URL here, and I'm going to be bringing her on stage in just 1 second after I read her bio. So Stina Holmes is the New York Times and USA Today bestselling author with over 2 million copies of her title sold worldwide, including The Forgotten Ones, Saving Abby, and The Memory Child. Named in the top 20 women author to read in 2015 by Good Housekeeping, she won the National Indie Excellence Award in 2012 for Finding Emma, as well as the USA Book News Award for The Word Game in 2015. Stina has been featured in various newspapers and magazines, websites such as Goodreads, BookBub, Redbook, Glamour, Coastal Living, and Good Housekeeping. To find out more about her books and her love for traveling, you can visit her website, which appears just below, which is stinaholmes.com. And right after the little video bit comes up, we are going to hear from Stina. If I can find the right buttons to push at the right time. Let's see what happens. Welcome.
I'm here.
You are here through the magic of technology, and I'm going to let you have the stage so you can share with the audience.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone, for joining in, despite the time changes and when we're all supposed to be here. I don't know about you, but that reading from Cathy was amazing, and I could listen to her read over and over and over. Like, she could have gone on past the 15 minutes. I would have been okay with it. Cathy, I definitely want to go and read your book because I love your voice, and I love how crazy and busy that sounded. That totally is something that I didn't think I would enjoy as a reader. I don't think I've ever read something like that, but I'm definitely going to be buying your book, and I hope others will too. I'm going to be taking you on a slightly different journey and a slightly different angle. We're going to be going with Lies We Tell Ourselves. This is my latest novel. It came out last year, and it's a little bit more suspenseful and not as quirky with the characters as what Cathy was, but I'm hoping that you will enjoy it. I have been talking all day, so forgive my voice if it kind of shakes or squeals, but let's get started. So Lies We Tell Ourselves, we're going to be focusing on Paige and Jessica. They're two twin sisters. One was kidnapped at a young age as a teenager, and the other one has just been trying to live without her twin sister. She works with an organization that helps to rescue sex-trafficked women. And so I think you can kind of tell what this book is going to be about, trying to rescue these women and live with a life that she didn't think she would ever have to live with without her sister. So let's get started. Chapter 1, Paisley Valley Hospital, present time, 3:30 a.m. Everyone lies. The doctors who say I'm safe, there are nurses who promise I'm protected, the police who swear to find my abuser. Everyone's lying to themselves, to me. No one can protect me. No one can keep me safe. No one will find the man who did this, even though he's probably right here in the middle of this mess, known by everyone. I shiver as I lay in this bed, a thin gray blanket, my only protection against the cold blast from the air conditioning. I could press the call button and ask for a new heated one, but that would mean having to reach the button that slipped from its placement on the bed. I can't do that. I can't move. I can't talk. I can barely see. Every single bone in my body feels broken. My skin flayed. My nerve endings on fire. It's a miracle I'm alive, they say. I say miracles don't happen in today's world. The pain, a cascading waterfall with a monstrous roar that's both deafening and destructive, slowly recedes until it's a dull throb, thanks to the morphine pumping through my system. I know tears flow from my swollen eyes. They tickle against my skin. I wish I could whisk them away. There's a commotion outside my hospital room. Excuse me. I know there's a police officer stationed by the door. She's a female. I don't recognize her though, which is a good thing. I don't trust anyone. I can't. I've learned the hard way that those you think are on your side, the ones that should be protecting you, they're the ones to fear the most. There's nothing quiet about this hospital. Not tonight, not at this hour. I hear everything. The squeak of a shoe, the whoosh from an open door, the ding of the elevator, the ring of a phone, and his voice. Oh God, not here, not now. I'm supposed to be safe. It's a low murmur, and it's his. I recognize that tone. I've listened to it for over 7 years. It's haunted my dreams, my nightmares, my every waking moment. It's a tone full of danger. I've learned to be careful, to be wary. I've learned how to play his games. But here, with whomever is guarding me, I hear a hint of friendliness that has me shaking. Don't be fooled, I try to yell out, but the sound is muffled in a groan, and a groan that's full of pain and fear. At first, I think no one can hear me, but then there's a pause and a creak from the door as it opens. Light from the hallway spills into my room, illuminating the dull walls and machines surrounding me. There's a thud of a footstep, and I fear his presence. He's watching me. One machine, the one playing a consistent tune, is louder now. The beat's increasing. My breath hitches and my heart stops and then starts, and blood rushes to my ears with the power of a tidal wave. There's a chuckle. It's his chuckle. No. He's here. He can't be here. They said I was safe. Well, I'm not safe. I'm in danger. More danger now than ever before when he beat me and left me for dead. My angel. His whisper slithers over me, sealing me in a skin of cold sweat. I shiver. I shake. I want to scream, but my swollen throat won't cooperate. It takes a mountain of strength, but I reach and I search for the call button. The pad of my index finger, the one I can move, hits the bed with a tap, tap, tap until it hits something solid. I feel for the indent of the button as I stare at the man who scares me more than hell itself. He's here, just out of reach, a hovering shadow. I barely make him out. He's a blur, but I know he's here. I know it's him. You think you've gotten away, that you're safe now, but that's not true. No one can protect you like I can. No one can keep your son safe like I can. I freeze. He keeps talking, his husky whispers wrapping me in chains, binding me to him. Stay quiet. Stay safe. He will stay safe. That's all you need to do. Don't say a word, and I'll return him to you. He hovers over me, close enough that I see the fire of truth shine bright in his eyes. He's a demon in disguise. Tell anyone about me, whisper my name even, and you'll never see your son alive again. He bends down, placing a kiss on my lips, searing himself into the open wounds he ministered earlier. Oh, my angel. If his whisper is meant as a caress, and it's peeling my skin off in layers with its touch, what will we do with you? Done. I'm not sure my voice can handle anymore. I hope you enjoyed that.
That was awesome. Yeah, you know, considering you were teaching workshops all day, is that what wore out your voice?
Yeah, 8 hours on content marketing. One of my favorite things to talk about.
Although I have to admit the sort of the gravelly sound of your voice was like, you know, like the gravel from a grave or something. It was very eerie, and it added an extra effect.
Oh,
to that.
good.
Now we have 2 books that we have to want to read and buy. So we can find out where to buy that over at StinaHolmes.com.
Absolutely.
Excellent. And while I have you on stage, I'm just going to alert the live audience to what we discovered as we were chatting backstage, is that the itinerary said that this should start at 7 p.m. Mountain, but the program said 6. I was looking at the program when I scheduled it and not the itinerary. didn't even notice the discrepancy. and we're rolling with it. And I think we've heard Cathy has heard from Vicky saying she thought it was starting at 7. So the 4 of us are going to continue on as we're going, and very shortly our other guests will probably arrive wondering, hey, why did you start with me? But I think we can handle this, right?
Yes, we can. We've got it.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Stina. Okay, so now I'm going to bring up Morgan Rhodes. I'm going to first find her URL to post onto the bottom of the site, and her biography, which I'm going to read to you before I bring her onto the stage. Now, Morgan Rhodes is the New York Times bestselling author of the Falling Kingdom series, which has been described as Game of Thrones for teens. As Michelle Rowan, she is the prolific and award-winning author of over 24 novels. She has written for Penguin, Grand Central, Harlequin, and Bloomsbury, as well as dipping her toe into indie publishing. A former president of the Toronto Romance Writers, Morgan lives in Mississauga, Ontario, my time zone, where she refills her creative well by watching trashy reality TV and drinking a lot of delicious coffee. She has 2 websites. You can find her over at morganrhodes.net. You can also find her at michellerowan.com. And so I'm going to pop up ye old introductory, and then you'll see through the magic of technology, she will be on stage with me. Morgan, welcome to the stage.
Hey, Mark. Glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for joining me. So you're going to treat us with a fun reading, and I'm going to go hide backstage again.
Amazing. Thank you again. See ya. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'll back up a bit so I'm not like totally in your face. Okay, so I haven't done a reading in a while. I don't know, COVID, but I'm ready to rock. So I wrote the Fallen Kingdom series for Razor Bill, which is a imprint of Penguin Teen, and it is a 6-book high fantasy series. And the last book came out in 2018, and then I had a bit of a lull where I've been working on my next book, Echoes and Empires, which is out in January. So I wasn't sure if I should read something new or something old, and then I decided I'd just go with the tried and true, which is I'm going to read my favorite scene from the 2nd book of the Fallen Kingdom series, Rebel Spring. So a little context before I start. Maybe spoilers, but I mean, the 1st book has been out for 9 years. So it's about 4 teens, rebels and royals, and their lives start to intertangle in a time of hidden magic and war. And at the point of the scene, our princess, Cleo, has been captured by the enemy, and her the betrothal that she had with this creepy boy that she didn't want to marry in the first place has been broken in order to be betrothed to the king's hateful son, as it is. You know, it always happens that way. So her ex has just heard this news and is freaking out. So here we go. Okay. In the throne room, King Gaius had draped himself upon her father's golden chair. Sprawled on the floor at his feet were 2 of his horrible dogs, large, slobbering wolfhounds that growled whenever she came even a step too close. They always seemed more like demons from the Darklands to Cleo than dogs. A sudden memory from her childhood flashed before her eyes, her father seated upon this very throne, his arms stretched out to her when she successfully slipped away from her strict nursemaid to run directly toward him and crawl up on his lap. She prayed that her eyes didn't reveal how very much she wanted to avenge her father's death. On the surface, she was just a girl, not yet out of her teens, small in stature and slight in figure, born and bred into a spoiled life of excess and luxury. At first glance, no one would ever perceive her as a threat. But she knew that she was. Her heart now beat for one reason, the only thing that helped staunch the flow of incapacitating grief: vengeance. Cleo knew she continued to live and breathe because King Gaius saw value in keeping the Iranian princess alive and well. She was required to represent what remained of the royal Bellos family line in all matters when it came to the king's agenda and his power over the Iranian people. She was a sparrow in a gilded cage, taken out to show others how pretty and how well-behaved she was when needed. So she would be pretty and well-behaved, for now, but not forever. "My dear girl," the king said as she and Magnus approached, "you grow lovelier with each day that passes. It's quite remarkable." "And you grow more hateful and disgusting," she thought. "Thank you, Your Majesty," she said aloud as sweetly as she could. The king was a snake in the skin of a man, and she would never underestimate the strength of his bite. "Were you pleased by my surprise announcement today?" he asked. She fought to keep her controlled expression from slipping. "I'm very grateful that you've allowed me such an honorable place in your kingdom." His smile stretched, but it was one that never met his dark brown eyes, the exact same shade as Magnus's. "And you, my son, I'm sure you were caught unawares as well. It was a last-minute decision, to tell you the truth. I thought it would please the people, and I was right. It did." "As always," Magnus replied, "I defer to your judgment." The sound of the prince's voice, low and even, and so much like his father's, set Cleo's nerves on edge more than they already were. "Lord Aaron wanted to speak with me in private," the king said. Private? A half-dozen guards stood around the edges of the room, with 2 on the outer side of the archway leading into the throne room. Next to the king, on a smaller throne, sat Queen Althea, her gaze straight forward, her lips set into a measured expression that betrayed no emotion at all. She might as well have been sleeping with her eyes wide open. Aaron stood to the right, his arms crossed over his chest. "Yes," he spoke up, his tone arrogant. "I explained to the king that this is an unacceptable change, that the people were looking very much forward to our wedding. Mother has already taken great strides in planning our ceremony. I wanted to talk to the king and have him reconsider his decision today. There are plenty of beautiful, titled girls in Reynolds that would be much better suited to Prince Magnus." King Gaius cocked his head, regarding Aaron with barely restrained amusement, as if he were a trained monkey. "Quite. And how do you feel about this abrupt change, Princess Cleona?" Her mouth had gone dry after hearing Aaron's little rant, which sounded like a child stomping his foot when his toys were taken. Sorry, I'm just having a little problem changing my page here. Her mouth had gone dry after hearing Aaron's little rant, which sounded like a child stomping his foot when his toys were taken from him at bedtime. Aaron was so accustomed to getting his way that it had completely disrupted his common sense. However, she couldn't completely blame him for trying to salvage what little power he had in the palace. But if he were smart, and she already knew brains were never Aaron's greatest asset, he would see that Cleo no longer wielded any power here, had no influence apart from being a figurehead meant to keep the Iranian people in line and gain their trust. She forced a smile. "Of course, I certainly bow to whatever decision the wise king makes on my behalf." The falseness of the words twisted in her throat. It's just, Aaron might have some weight to his argument. The kingdom was rather smitten by the thought of us together after Aaron's, very fierce protection of me that day in the Palestine market. She inwardly shuddered at the memory of Thomas Aguilon's murder, an act that had nothing to do with protection and more to do with Aaron overreacting to a personal insult. "I assure you I did consider this." The king's stolen crown caught the torchlight and glinted. "Lord Aaron is wholly embraced by the Iranian people without question. It's one of the reasons I've just informed him of my decision to bestow the title of King's Liege upon him." Aaron bowed deeply. "And I'm very pleased by this honor, Your Majesty." "King's Liege," Magnus mused from beside her, loud enough for only Cleo to hear. Such a lofty title for one who's never even been in a battle. How deeply pathetic. King Gaius studied Cleo closely. "Do you wish to remain engaged to Lord Aaron?" She wanted to answer immediately and in the affirmative. Aaron, despite his shortcomings, was a more palatable prospect than Magnus, but found herself pausing to think it through. She wasn't simple-minded enough to believe such wishes would be granted. After announcing the wedding date to the citizens outside, there was absolutely no chance the king would renege on his proclamation. All agreeing with Aaron would do was make her look like a fool, an ungrateful and disrespectful fool. Cleo lowered her head and studied the dogs by the king's feet, as if too shy to meet his gaze directly. Your Majesty, I wish only to please you. He gave her a shallow nod, as if this was the correct response. Then I appreciate your allowing me to make this choice on your behalf. Aaron let out a grunt of disgust. Oh, come on, Cleo. She gave him a wary look, silently cautioning him to be careful with what he said. Aaron, you must see that the king knows what is right. But we were meant to be together, he whined. You will find another bride, Aaron, but I'm afraid it won't be me. Anger lit his gaze, and he spun to face Prince Magnus. It's very important for a bride to be pure on her wedding night. Is this not so? Cleo's cheeks began to flame. Aaron! He gestured wildly at her. Cleo already gave her chastity to me. She is not pure. A deadly silence fell. Cleo grappled to hold on to her self-control, but felt it slipping from her grasp. Here it was, her horrible secret, kept hidden from the world, tossed out like a landed fish, flopping and slimy for all to see. Foggy memories of a party, too much wine, a spoiled princess who enjoyed forgetting herself and having fun, and then Aaron, a handsome and popular lord all her friends desired, who wanted to be with her more than anyone else. Once she sobered, she realized it was a horrific mistake to sacrifice her virginity to such a vain and shallow boy. To be viewed now as a fallen princess in a land that valued purity as a bride's most important virtue could be her ultimate downfall. She would lose what little power she had left in the palace. Only one choice could help her salvage this situation. Oh, Aaron, she said as dryly as she could manage, I almost feel sorry for you that you must lie to such extremes today. Can't you simply accept defeat gracefully? His eyes widened so much that she could see the whites all around his irises. Lie? It's not a lie. You wanted me as I wanted you. You must admit that this is the truth and be grateful. I even still want you. King Gaius leaned back on the throne and regarded them, his fingers templed. Seems that we have a disagreement here. The truth is very important to me, the most important thing of all. Lies are intolerable. Princess, are you saying that this boy would lie about something so important? Yes, she said without hesitation. She gazed at the king, clear-eyed. He lies. Cleo! Aaron sputtered, outraged. Then, the king said, I have no choice but to believe you. He flicked a glance at Magnus. Tell me, my son, what do we usually do in Lameros with those who would lie to a king? Magnus's face was unreadable as always, his arms crossed over his chest. The penalty for lying is to have one's tongue cut out. The king nodded, then gestured toward the guards. 2 guards stepped forward and took hold of Aaron's arms tightly. He gasped, his face wild with fear. Your Majesty, you can't do this. I'm not lying. I would never lie to you. I obey your command in all ways. You are my king now. Please, you must believe me. The king said nothing, but nodded at another guard who approached, drawing a dagger from the sheath at his waist. Aaron was forced to his knees. A 4th guard took hold of his jaw, grabbed a handful of his hair, and wrenched open Aaron's mouth. The guard used a metal clamp to pull his tongue out from between his lips, and Aaron let out a strangled cry of horror. Cleo watched all of this unfold in cold shock. She hated Aaron. She hated that she'd allowed herself to be with him, taking solace only in the fact that she'd been too drunk to remember much about the act itself. She hated that he'd killed Thomas Aguilon without a moment's remorse, and she hated that her father had betrothed her to him. She hated that Aaron was so thoughtless that he didn't understand why all of this was so vile to her. He deserved to be punished in many ways. He did. But not for this. He told the king the truth. However, to admit she was the one who lied? Oh, goddess Cleona. Cleo hardly ever prayed to her namesake, the Oranian deity, but she's certainly making an exception today. Please, please help me. She could let this happen without protest. It would be her secret until the day she died. No one would ever believe Aaron after this punishment. Her fists were clenched so tight, Her fingernails bit painfully into her palms as she watched the dagger move toward Aaron's mouth. He let out a terror-filled screech. "Stop!" Cleo shouted, the word escaping her before she even realized it. She trembled from head to foot, her heart pounding so hard that it rocked her entire frame. "Don't do this, please, don't." Oh, he didn't lie. He was telling the truth. We were together one single time. I did give my chastity to him knowingly and without reservation. The guard holding the dagger froze, the edge of the blade pressed to Aaron's pink, squirming tongue. "Well now," King Gaius said softly, but Cleo had never heard more menace in anyone's voice. "That certainly changes things, doesn't it?" The end.
Thank you so much. I guess one of the most frustrating things about these readings is you're like, but don't leave us hanging there.
I know.
I guess
what happens next? I don't know.
How are they going to figure out what happens next? They must go to your website and find a link to where they can buy the book. Right?
I mean, all 6 books are available now. Find them on my website.
Ask for them at your favorite public library as well.
Public libraries are great too. I love libraries.
Awesome. So we have some of our other guests are arriving in the back room. I'm going to bring Cathy and Stina up to the stage. Surprise! There we go. And Dave's right now. He's getting his makeup put on in the back room. He's in the green room enjoying all the treats that I laid out for everyone in the virtual back room. But I do want to invite if anyone has any questions or comments for these awesome guests. I'm going to do some of the questions now. I guess the first thing I want to ask, and I'm just going to throw this out there, and you guys can sort of answer however jump in, is it's very obvious listening to you ladies read that, I mean, you're not new to this. You've been doing this for a long, long time. But how long did it take before you became comfortable figuring out how to read to a public, what to pick and how to read? Because I'm sure people are curious because you're like naturals when you do it.
You're assuming we're comfortable.
Okay. So you're acting.
No, yes. You know what? I have to say, my very first reading, I think I did in like 2008, just at a library. Okay. My voice was shaking. Like I was shaking. And you know how you can't get any saliva in your mouth. It's so funny looking back on that. For me, it's just a matter of practice. It's like going on the highway. I'm like nervous taking, Google Maps on the highway. And after you do it a few times, it gets easier and easier. So as far as picking what to read, I just like to, pick something hooky, something with, especially for Fallen Kingdoms, the promise of violence and death.
That's always a hook.
Yeah, you're quite right, Morgan. In terms of the practice, I don't think practice makes perfect. Practice just means you go over the same thing and relive the nerves all over again. But for me, I find if I read a Kate Morgan book, it's easier for me in a way because her voice is my voice. She's Welsh Canadian. I'm Welsh Canadian. It's told in the first person. So I'm able to get right in there as her, if you like. There's quite a lot in common between us, actually, but let's not go there. But I actually passed the audition to read my own books for Audible.
Well, you have a great voice.
I didn't know I was being auditioned at the time. Audible were listening, and I was doing something else in a studio. And then they said, yes, you passed the audition to read your first 2. Only the first 2. They never bought the rest of them. So maybe I wasn't that good. But anyway, I do get to read. So if, as you said, Stina, very nicely, thank you very much, you'd love to hear my voice more and more.
Yes.
There's approximately 20 to 22 hours of it out there. The first 2 books are Audible. So you can listen to me for 22 hours.
Perfect.
There you go. I can send you to sleep.
And I have to add, there have been comments from the audience about the reading as well. So excellent, thank you guys. I invite people to leave comments. But okay, great. So we can go and we can find those in audio too. That's fantastic.
Oh, I will definitely be buying them, Cathy. I loved how you read that.
Oh, thank you. Tell my husband.
Bring him in the room and I'll tell him.
Oh, no, I daren't. No, I can't. No, I can't even tell you why I can't. I'm so close to too much information. Just not go. I'm not going there.
I find I love doing readings
Oh,
I don't
really?
know. Yeah, I don't know if it's just because of my past and, I preacher or pastor, or whatever, doing it on a regular basis, speaking in front of people, but I love it. And I love getting reacquainted with my characters in the books. And reminding myself why I fell in love with them in the first place, even if they're creepy, even if I don't know where we're going with the story. I enjoy it. I would love to do more of it, actually. I don't know if my voice would or whatnot, or my body would appreciate it if I did too many of it, but I really enjoy readings.
Yeah. It's hard work doing a reading. When I was doing those Audible books, I was in the studio 5 days, so sitting down, no audience, just the big headphones and the microphone and all of that. And I was reading for 5 days and straight. And it is exhausting, absolutely exhausting. And then they wanted me back then to do what they call pickups. In other words, all the things I just flubbed, they get rid of those on the day, but there will be things that not even they are professional ears pick up. And I live 2.5 hours drive away from the studios down in downtown Vancouver. I drove there for 2.5 hours. I was in the studio for 3 minutes, and then I drove home again for 2.5 hours. So all of these people who go off to studios, it's lovely, but it depends where it is, right?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
But they are, it's hard work. So I like doing readings, and I know we're all going to get back to live readings one day, aren't we?
Yeah.
And that will be a cause for great celebration. And you can stand up and have at it, and hear this in the background. And that's the sound of people waking themselves up again. No.
That's what I should have done. Is I should have piped in some audience applause music. So when you finished, there could have been the applause. Okay, I will do that next time. I'll do that for your keynotes. At the end of your keynotes.
No. Yes, that'll be lovely.
So Morgan mentioned something interesting. You were looking for something that had a hook. I mean, I think we know why that's important, because obviously you're there to entice people to want to check out your readings. But how hard is it for you to find that so appropriate piece, especially when obviously the audience may not be familiar with the setup? Like, how does that work for you guys as authors?
Trial and error. I mean, there's a lot of scenes you can't really read because they'd be too spoilery, or there'd be too much inside. Like, you would need to have read the book to understand what was going on.
Okay.
Which is probably why for 8 years I pretty much read the same excerpt, because I mean, it does spoil some things from book one, but it sets up the characters. It shows Cleo, her motivation that sends her through the rest of the series is she's in enemy territory, and she's using what wits she has. She's not a fighter. She's kind of a thinker, which is the last thing anyone would accuse her of, as being, a pampered princess. But that's why I like to read in her point of view. There are other scenes I could read. Also, it's fun. I just like kind of like the dramatic part. And I think for that genre, it's a good scene. And for the fact that all three of us, our books are so very different. You guys, I mean, Stina, you probably pick a very emotional, heart-wrenching. And Cathy, yours is, mysterious and witty. So, yeah, it's your middle name.
Like me.
That's you.
Oh, quirky.
But it must be difficult for you, particularly, Stina, because you're dealing with some challenging topics. So how do you getting people on board to understand? And I agree with what Mark said about the voice. The gravelly voice was perfect for that. But you're bringing people to a very dark place very quickly. Are people prepared to go?
Well, I think they are, because that's what the genre is, and it's their expectations of what they're about to read, right? So in my class today, when I talked about content marketing, we did a little bit. Half the session was on branding, and we talked a lot about what readers' expectations are when it comes to your brand, and your brand is also the genre that you write, and so readers have an expectation of the experience that they're about to explore, right? So they know, depending on the genre, they know exactly what they're about to experience. And so it's not hard for me at all to stay within those guidelines of what I know readers are going to expect, because it's exactly what I love to write, and it's what I love to read anyway. So I love to start my books all with a hook, right? And it's always something like that. it's what makes it exciting for me, because I have no idea where I'm going to go after these first chapters. I'm not the type of writer who can plot very, very far in advance. So as long as I can start in a place that scares me or puts me in a place where I'm uneasy, that's the better.
Yeah. It's the sort of thing you see when you're doing blue pencils or slush piles. It is quite often people will give you the beginning of a book, and that's why I picked the beginning. You're either going to grab people then and carry them along with you, or you're not. And that quite often, as a writer, we all know how important those first pages are, and that's why I think a lot of us end up reading first pages, or certainly critical parts. Even, you might have an intro and then the first page, but because that's where we're going to grab readers. So listeners, it's the same thing, really.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I'm talking about that tomorrow in one of my classes on openings, on the first chapters.
Awesome. Ladies, I want to thank you so much for helping to fill the time. We're going to have more of this conversation with all of our guests. Now, as I'd mentioned, Dave did not hog all of the food in the green room, all of the stuff that was laid out and everything. He left some for Fonda and for Vicky. I did see Vicky was there. She'll probably be back soon. But what I'm going to do, so I'm going to pop you wonderful ladies backstage so you can go back and fill up on some of those treats. And then what we'll do is I'm going to bring up Dave. I'll introduce him, and we can kind of do the talks, readings, and then bring everyone back for one final conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark.
Awesome.
Thanks, Mark.
All right. So I am going to bring up Dave Reynolds next. And Dave Reynolds is our industry representative. It's always great when Words Collide, when they bring folks in from the industry just to help readers and writers understand those people who work so hard to bring books into our lives. And so I'm going to read Dave Reynolds' bio. There'll be a little magic thing, as you often see, and then Dave will be magically up on stage with me when it finishes. Now, Dave Reynolds has been the Associate Category Manager, Local Authors for Western Canada for Indigo Chapters Cole since January of 2016. Dave started with Chapters as a bookseller in 1997 and has held various positions in the stores and home office since that time. Before becoming a bookseller, Dave received an honors diploma in film and video from the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. Dave has written original, short, and feature-length screenplays and has directed and produced several short films. In his spare time, he likes to travel by a bicycle. So now we're about to bring Dave up to the stage, if I can, find the buttons and all the things that I'm supposed to do while I'm producing this show. Hey, Dave, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming in, and my apologies for the weird time discrepancy thing that happened.
It worked out.
Worked out also well because Cathy and Stina and Morgan are pros, and they helped to jump in a little bit earlier for that group discussion. But my friend, I'm gonna, just like you were alone in the green room for a while enjoying all the snacks, you're gonna be alone on stage while I pop back there.
Sure, no problem. Hi, everybody. Well, Mark introduced me, so what can I say? What else can I say? If you've ever emailed newauthor@indigo.ca or newpublisher@indigo.ca to ask a question about how things work at Indigo, if you're an author, and sometimes customer service things come to me as well. If you've ever emailed and got a response, about 50% of them come from me, and about the other half come from my colleague in the East, Pam Estabrook, who's in Halifax. I'm in Calgary. I've worked for our home office for quite some time. My boss was in Vancouver or Toronto, but moved to Vancouver briefly. So he's currently in Vancouver. But yeah, it's all of the changes that have happened. I used to work at a store in Indigo, Signal Hill in Calgary. I worked there for probably 7 or 8 years at least, if not more, maybe 10. I can't remember now. The time just flies. And I used to work in a store, and I miss working in a store. I'm now permanently working from home. The whole COVID thing in Teams, or we use Teams at Indigo, has led to me being on a ton of meetings all the time, and so I don't even get to do my cycling commute in the morning. which I really miss. That was like probably, I mean, other than being in our beautiful bookstore, which is always fantastic, that's probably the thing I miss the most. And the other thing I miss about my commute is I listen to audiobooks. I love audio. I love listening to audiobooks while I'm riding my bike. I know some people think I probably shouldn't listen to, but when you're listening to an audiobook, you can hear it's not like music thumping in your headphones. You can hear the background when you're listening to an audiobook. And it let me listen to like an extra book a month. Like I could read an extra book a month doing that commute. So I miss that. I just wanted to, I mean, I don't have anything to read. I could dig out an old screenplay or something, but it would be very strange. So all I'm going to do is just talk about what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow. I have a master class tomorrow at 9 a.m. Mountain, 11 Eastern, where I'm going to be talking mainly to authors, and it's meant for authors and small publishers, just about the various ways to deal with indigo, the way that we work, the way that we decide what to buy, what to put in stores, and how we merchandise, what we're like new stuff we're working on, and how to navigate that whole indigo system and sell books with us. And then tomorrow for my keynote, I'm going to be talking about how sort of COVID has the things that we did during COVID, like the stores were closed for a very long time, and then they reopened for curbside pickup. We had to figure out how to do that, like how to do curbside pickup with our website. Our website was crazy busy for the first, well, I mean, it still is, even though now the stores are open, but our website really went kind of bananas when this happened. And so, yeah, just talk about what we're doing, what we're working on, what we're working towards. That's going to be my keynote thing. And then Saturday, I have an hour with me, which I think is mostly just going to be kind of like an Ask Me Anything about indigo, not about me. Ask me anything about indigo, and I should be able to answer most of those questions. And that's pretty much it. I don't really have anything else to offer right now. I'm happy to be part of the discussion, and you know, it's kind of sad that I don't have anything to read like the other authors, because it's a really cool thing. So I'm looking forward to what's coming up.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dave.
Thanks, Mark.
Dave, I'm curious because your path and my path are very similar. I mean, I started with what it was originally Kohl's back in 1992. Yep. So I started in the 90s in the bookstores, got bit by the book bug like you did. Yep. And then because I was a writer, the question I want to ask you is, were you always interested in writing, like screenwriting, film, and things like that? Oh, yeah. I actually started writing like when I was in high school, I would say. And I really, really wanted to do film. What I wanted to be was a producer. I wanted to make other people's movies. But of course, to be a producer, you have to have a pile of money, and I didn't have a pile of money. So then you have to write your own stuff and direct your own stuff. And so I was kind of doing that. And that's what got me into writing. And of course, just it became a very expensive hobby as opposed to like a side hustle. And so I really haven't done any writing. I've done a lot of technical writing over the years at Indigo, but I haven't done a lot of writing outside of that for a very long time. I'm so busy, and you know, the life happens, and so I just haven't done it for a while. But I always enjoyed writing. I really do. Like I even the technical writing, I really like the word, you know, using words and figuring out the best way to say things and things like that. So I'm very interested in the writing process. I still read books on writing, even though I don't write anymore. I love those kinds of things. So the technical books about writing. So, and I know, we did meet when we were doing when we changed our systems back in 2004, I remember we met when you were in Toronto. So way back when.
Yeah, way back when.
Those days, when I was lucky enough to be working in head office. It's funny when you talked about wanting to be a producer and support the people doing it. That's kind of what you do, right?
Yeah,
you're supporting publishers,
similar way,
and readers, right?
Yeah, I kind of feel that way. I guess I'm not like sitting back with a big cigar and, you know, pulling all the strings or whatever, but it is really more about like helping people navigate. And it, you know, part of that is Indigo's pretty big. I mean, for Canada, it's pretty big. You know, a chain with a lot of stores and a lot of moving parts. But when I answer an email to authors, or I talk to them on the phone, many of them just say, wow, I was surprised. I thought I would just get like an auto response and so I like being able to, help people. I've always enjoyed that. I like, even internally, I like showing people how to do things and how to do this. And I've been around long enough that I know all of the workarounds for all the stuff. Right. And so, and I love sharing knowledge with everybody. So it's really great to be able to help authors. I only wish that I could do more, but there's so many. So many books and so many authors, and so it's really just all I can really do is help you get your foot in the door, and then the rest is kind of up to you. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dave. I
Sure.
want to comment to Vicky. Vicky, wave if you can hear me. I want to make sure you can hear me. I can see that you're in the backroom studio, and I will bring you onto the stage. I'm going to bring up Fonda first, and then I'm going to bring you up, Vicky. So I'm hoping you hang in there and stay with us. The challenge of not being able to have the backdoor communication. So thanks so much, Dave. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Bring you back later on as part of the group. And now I'm about to introduce Fonda. So let me find Fonda's URL and her biography, so I can then introduce her to you fine folks who are watching live. Fonda Lee is the author of the Greenbone saga, beginning with Jade City, published by Orbit, which won the 2018 World Fantasy Award for Best Novel, and continuing in Jade War. She is also the author of the acclaimed young adult science fiction novels Zero Boxer from Flux, Exo, and Crossfire from Scholastic. Fonda's work has been nominated for the Nebula, Andre Norton, and Locus Awards, and has been named to Best of the Year lists by NPR, Barnes & Noble, Powell's Books, and Sci-Fi Wire. She won the Aurora Award, Canada's National Science Fiction and Fantasy Award, twice in the same year for Best Novel and Best Young Adult Novel. Fonda is a recovering corporate strategist, black belt martial artist, and action movie aficionado residing in Portland, Oregon. And you can find Fonda online on Twitter at Fonda J. Lee or on the website fondalee.com. And she will be coming to the stage in just one moment. Hey, Fonda, welcome.
Hi, Mark. That's like the most rocking intro I think I've ever had.
It was so much fun grabbing your book covers and going, oh, now I've got to read this. Now I've got to read this. And I'm sure by the time you finish reading, people who are watching are going to go, oh my God, where can I buy this? So I'm going to leave it to you.
Thanks, Mark. Well, hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I wish I was physically in Calgary. I'm from Calgary, hometown. Family's there. And, I wish that we were all gathered in the Delta Hotel. But this is the next best thing. So I'm glad to be here. I struggled to decide what I was going to read tonight because I just finished the Greenbone saga. And that giant project that has consumed my life for like the last 6+ years is going to come to an end in November, and it will come out November 30th. So the first book, I actually have them here, Jade City. The second book, Jade War, and the third one, Jade Legacy, are set in this fictional secondary world fantasy that is I've described at various times as the Godfather with magic and kung fu. It's a family gangster saga with magic, jade, and martial arts and political intrigue. And I could not figure out how to read something out of this brick that was not full of spoiler for the first 2 books. So I am going to read instead from something that is not even published yet. And I think that this is kind of the fun part of being able to go to an author reading, is that sometimes you get to hear stuff that the author's working on that doesn't exist in print yet, but will. So I'm going to read from a standalone novella in the Greenbone Saga universe. This is going to be released in spring of 2022, so it will not be out for a few months yet, but it ties into the world, And if you like what you hear, you will very much like the 3 books. And it's a nice kind of standalone introduction that will give you a flavor of the books without me having to catch you up on everything. So I'm just going to dive right in. The duel occurred at noon in the parking lot of a Jolo Plus Mart and lasted under 3 minutes. Afterward, an ambulance arrived, but the medics left when they saw there was nothing to be done about the man on the asphalt. A powerful blast of channeling had stopped his heart. Pulo had never seen a man killed so quickly and decisively. My blade is clean. The victor, a junior fist of the Mountain Clan, ceremoniously wiped the length of his moon blade on the inside of his sleeve before bending to remove the jade from his opponent's body. Gam Oben had a dark complexion and a sharp chin, and even the simplest of his movements seemed lithe and infused with dangerous energy. Pulo turned away, self-consciously fingering the 2 jade studs in his left ear. He and Gam both wore jade. They were of a similar size and build, and a similar age. Pulo was 22 years old, and Gam perhaps a couple of years older. Unfortunately, that was where the similarities ended. Gam Oben, Pulo thought, with a sigh of resignation, was as impressive a jade warrior as Pulo had once imagined himself becoming. The impromptu crowd that had gathered to watch the contest milled about, discussing the dramatic outcome. It was uncommon for clean-bladed duels between members of the same clan to end fatally. Of course, it was the prerogative of the winner to take his adversary's life in addition to his jade, but why eliminate a man from your own side and create bad feelings with that person's family unnecessarily? However, these were not usual circumstances. Pulo left the scene and hurried back toward the shop. Gam was still accepting congratulations and enjoying his victory, but it wouldn't be long before he made his way over to the jade setters. Isen would want Pulo to be there to help behind the counter. The sidewalks were clogged with streams of people enjoying the city's damp but warm late spring weather. Well-dressed women browsing window displays of the latest foreign fashions. Office workers lining up to buy lunch from food stands selling hot noodles and barbecue meat on skewers. Petitioners visiting the temple district's houses of worship to hang prayer cards on the devotional trees. Ordinary people, most of whom didn't wear jade, going about their normal lives. One wouldn't think that mere minutes ago and a few blocks away, a man had died, and with him, whatever hopes and dreams he might have had. Pulo weaved through the crush of pedestrians, his eyes on the sidewalk, his thoughts turned inward. What would it be like to offer or accept a clean blade, knowing you might be killed in the contest? How had Gam and his rival felt in the seconds before the fight as they saluted each other and offered up prayers to the gods? Pulo had always wondered. If it weren't for the ironclad neutrality of the Haido Shield clan, which forbade dueling for jade, would he have the thick blood to risk his life? Isen's squat shop was sandwiched between 2 taller, newer buildings, a 24-hour foot spa on one side and a 3-story record shop on the other. The modest sign over the door was hand-painted in a dated style. Carving, setting, piercing. It was fading to illegibility, but that hardly mattered. Everyone knew where to find the best jade setter in the city of Jonlu, and likely the whole island of Kakon. Skyrocketing real estate prices would have made it profitable for a developer to buy the shop, demolish it, and erect a high-rise building in its place. That wouldn't happen, as no one would dream of forcing Isen out. His services were too renowned and highly valued by jade warriors in all the Greenbone clans. Pulo pushed through the front door, causing the bell over it to jangle its familiar tinny chime. Gam won the duel, he announced. He's probably on his way here right now. Isen did not look up from the small table where he sat examining a wristwatch with a jade face. He moved the loop away and sighed regretfully. The crack is deep. Even if we perform the repair, it won't be reliable in a battle. He handed the watch to Mala and said, "Call the customer and see whether he wants it returned or carved down and reset." Gam Oben is the second fist of the mountain, Pulo said, leaning over the counter to get the Jade Master Jade Setter's attention. If he's pleased with our work, he could put in a good word for us. With clan patronage, we could expand the shop. We'd have twice as much space if we move out of the Temple District and into, say, Sogen or Cherry Grove. Or we could keep this place but set up a second location. I could manage it for you. Eason settled his bifocals back onto the bridge of his nose and gazed patiently up at his apprentice. His thick gray eyebrows twitched over eyes that blinked too much as a result of countless hours spent doing fine work under bright lights. Pulo thought his master's short, wiry beard and placidly dignified expression made him look like an aged terrier in a wool jacket. Your job is to learn the craft of jade setting, Eason reminded him. Pulo replied with a touch of frustration he couldn't hide. I've been doing that all this time, but we can't run a successful business on technical skill alone. We need to make savvier business decisions. At least consider renovating the front of the shop. The shop's fine as it is, Eason said, adjusting a tray in the display case. Pulo bit his tongue and glanced at Mala. She gave him a sympathetic look, but shrugged as if to say, what'd you expect? It wasn't as if they hadn't had this argument before. Pulo knew why Eason refused to adopt his suggestions. A major expansion required capital, and the best way to secure a loan was by asking for patronage from one of the two major clans. Moving the shop would also mean deciding whose territory to locate in. Those decisions would make Eason a tribute-paying lantern man. It meant choosing a side. Pulo was willing to leave the minor Haido Shield clan and its policy of neutrality. Eason wasn't. Before Pulo could press his argument further, a gleaming ZT Toro pulled up to the curb in front of the shop. 3 men stepped out of the car. Pulo could perceive their jade auras before they reached the door, as a bright, energetic hum in his mind. Without prompting, Mala turned and went into the workroom behind the counter, her loose curly hair bobbing against her straight shoulders as she disappeared from view. Mala was a bouquet, which was both an advantage and a detriment in the jade setting profession. On one hand, she was not affected by jade, and thus never had to be concerned about overexposure, which might lead to illness or death in other people. But prejudice ran deep. Greenbone warriors might appreciate the traditional jade carving techniques of the island's indigenous artists, but that didn't mean they wanted to see one in the front of the shop. The door swung open with a loud jingling of the entry bell. As Pulo had expected, Gam Oben came in, his dark face still flushed and his jade aura crackling with the residual adrenaline of the fight. Behind him came 2 others, another fist that Pulo didn't recognize, followed by a huge man who was impossible not to recognize. Eason clasped his hands together and touched them to his forehead in a respectful salute. Pulo hastily followed suit. Gaunt Jen, Eason said mildly, I'm always honored to have the Horn of the Mountain clan visit my humble business. What can I do for you today? There were green bones, Pulo thought. And then there were green bones. Anyone who wore jade, who trained in the 6 traditional disciplines and graduated from one of Keikon's martial academies, was a greenbone who earned the suffix gen. Even someone like him, a jade setter's apprentice with only 2 jade stones. Men like Gaunt Ash were different. Second in authority only to the pillar, the Horn was the top warrior who commanded all the fists and the fingers on the military side of the clan. Gaunt's massive shoulders were crisscrossed with raised white scars, and he wore his copious amount of jade encrusted on striking leather arm guards that Eason had created for him years ago. He seemed to fill the room with his imposing frame as he turned slowly, taking in the small shop and everyone inside. Pulo was sure the Horn could perceive Mala's hidden presence in the back of the building, and Pulo's own heart thumping. One of my fists has come into possession of some new jade. Gaunt's voice was a low, even baritone, unexpectedly smooth and congenial. Eason turned toward Gam, who was examining the glass display case of ring settings. Far do your enemies flee, Gam Jen, he congratulated the fist. I slept well last night, Gam said, politely but curtly deflecting the praise. He laid his spoils on the countertop. I need the rings resized, and I want to have the studs remounted and to get nose piercings for them. Very good, Gam Jen, Eason said, examining the jade. We can do all of that right now. He measured Gam's ring size, then handed the rings to Pulo, who placed them on a tray and took them into the back of the shop for Mala to work on. Half size smaller, simple enough, Eason's assistant said, turning the bands under a work light. I'll solder a layer of matching gold onto the inner metal band, and he won't lose any of the jade at all. She looked up at Pulo, hovering over her shoulder. What's wrong? Pulo shifted back, dropping his eyes. Nothing, he muttered, before blurting out. It's not right that you hide back here every time customers come in. You ought to be out in the front of the shop with us, getting credit for the work you do. Pulo's face flushed with discomfort as he glanced up into her surprised expression. Well, Mala was a talented jeweler, and her detailed handiwork was flawless. She was a patient person who would be naturally good at the front counter. When Mala smiled, always slowly and with her mouth closed, her cheeks rounded into plump bronze hills under her large amber-flecked brown eyes. Mala was a similar age to Pulo, but she'd been working for Isen for longer than Pulo had been an apprentice. Pulo had never seen the master jade setter order Mala away from public view, but that had seemed to be the unspoken expectation from the beginning. At first, Pulo hadn't questioned it, but now it increasingly bothered him. Given his matchless repute as a master craftsman, was the old man really so concerned about superstitious bigots objecting to the idea of a stone eye working in his shop and handling their jade? If only Mala wasn't a bouquet. Pulo set his mouth. I'm going to talk to Isen about it. Please don't, Mala said quickly. It's not Isen's fault. She turned away from him, embarrassed, but not before Pulo glimpsed an anxious, almost fearful shadow cross her face. I'd rather be in the back room, honestly. I'm more comfortable here. But, Pulo began, it's kind of you to worry about me, but you don't have to do that. Mala gave him a small, appeasing smile, and her tone was polite, but it was clear she didn't want to talk about the issue anymore. She tucked a lock of hair behind her ear as she picked up the first of Gam's rings. Shouldn't you go back out there to help Isen? Dissatisfied but unable to argue, Pulo returned to the front of the store. By now, Isen had seated Gam in the side room and was unwrapping a sterile piercing needle. He'd marked the spots where Gam wanted his 4 new jade studs, a bridge piercing and 2 nostril piercings, one on each side. At Pulo's appearance, the master jade setter said, Gam Jen, with your permission, I'd like my apprentice to do the work. I vouch for his abilities, completely. Gam's eyes slid over to Pulo with mild interest. He shrugged in acquiescence. Pulo washed his hands and put on latex gloves. Isen had given him a simple task that he'd performed many times, but he'd never before handled the jade of a greenbone as highly ranked as Gam. Was Isen giving him this responsibility, publicly demonstrating his confidence in his apprentice, as reconciliation for repeatedly shooting down his ideas? Was he giving Pulo a chance to be noticed and remembered by mountain clan leaders? When Pulo picked up the remounted jade studs, a faint tingle warmed his fingers and spread up his arms. The jade energy sharpened his senses for a moment. The light in the room brightened. Every detail seemed crisper and every noise more distinct, like the improvement in a broadcast when a nudged television antenna receives a clear signal. He wondered how much more the jade would do for Gam once he wore it. Thinking of the duel he'd seen, he imagined the fist's leaps of lightness being faster and higher, his reflexes honed by greater perception, his strength and steel more unassailable, his deflection more powerful, and his channeling more lethal. A familiar envy stirred in Pulo's chest as he gave Gam 1 nostril piercing, then the other. How long have you been a jade setter's apprentice? Gam asked, not with any great interest, but no doubt wondering whether to trust his skills. 4 years, Gamjen. 4 years of labor for an exacting but unambitious master in a profession he'd fallen into through no desire of his own. I didn't know Isen took on apprentices, Gam said. You must be the first one. Pulo hesitated. Isen Jen agreed to train me because I'm also from the Haido Shield clan. When he retires, he wants the shop to stay open to all greenbones. I'm good at detailed work and have a naturally high jade tolerance, so he thought I could learn the craft. He didn't mention that he'd had no choice in the matter. His aunt was one of the elders of the clan and had already put forth his name to Isen with the expectation that he accept the position. When Pulo finished the bridge piercing, he handed Gam a mirror. The fist turned his face back and forth. He nodded in satisfaction at the way the new jade stood out bright and arresting against his dark skin. Isen Jan, Gam called out to the master jade setter. Your apprentice did a good job. What do you think? Does this jade look better on me than it did on poor Tasso Gumi? The jade is where it belongs, Gamjen, Isen said equably. Isen was known to have an astonishing memory. He remembered the jade pieces he'd carved and set for thousands of greenbones over the course of 20 years, and he often saw his work change hands. The jade setter might spend weeks painstakingly designing an elaborate jade necklace for one warrior. Then a year later, he would calmly and without question destroy his creation and remount all the jade stones into a belt for another man who'd fought and killed the original owner. The Temple District was one of the few areas of Janloon that was perpetually neutral territory. Isen saw customers from all the clans. They trusted him as he would never spread rumors or betray the confidence of anyone. Of course, there were other jade setters in other parts of Janloon who serviced one clan or another exclusively, but none of them were as talented as Isen Nakokun. As Gam stood, Pullo asked, "Was it hard to take the jade, to kill a member of your own clan?" Only after the question had impulsively left his mouth did it occur to him that the fist might not take well to the loaded question. When Gam gave him a narrow-eyed look of surprise, Pullo began to stammer an apology. "I'm sorry if that sounded rude, Gamjan. It's only that I saw the duel and I wondered—" "No," Gam answered, bluntly, but seemingly unoffended. "Tasso had his chance. The leadership of the clan has been settled. If any fist slanders his own pillar, he ought to expect to be challenged by those who are loyal and to pay with his life if he loses." Before he strode out of the room, he looked back at Pullo with a curious, faintly patronizing glance and tilted his sharp chin. Life must be simpler in the Haido Shield clan. And I will stop there. No doubt, life will not prove simple for poor Pullo and Isen and the Jade Setter's shop, and you can read the rest of it when the book comes out next year. But if you want to, in the meantime, dive into the Greenbone Saga, there's plenty of pages for you before then.
That's fantastic. I have to echo this comment from Crafty Sloth, who said, "Loving these descriptions. Such a treat to hear this before it's officially published." And I can't agree with that enough. And also, what a great introduction for anyone who's not familiar and now has, okay, I don't have to wait. I can enjoy books 1 and 2 in this series. So that is fantastic. Thank you so much, Fonda. I really appreciate that. I'm going to move you a bit to the backstage, and I'm going to read Vicky Delaney's introduction, because Vicky let me know, she communicated with me that she was having issues. So she was popping into the green room and I could see her there, and then she was disappearing again. And then she messaged me privately to let me know that she was actually having technical issues because she's in a rural area. She ran an internet test and was just unable to handle the video. But I do want to show Vicky some love. And we don't have the honor and privilege of getting to hear her read, but I do want to read her bio. So I'm going to bring up her website and read a little bit about Vicky before I can bring everyone back up on a stage. Vicky Delaney is one of Canada's most prolific and varied crime writers and a national bestseller in the US. She's the author of more than 35 published books so far, from clever cozies to gothic thrillers and gritty police procedurals to historical fiction and novellas for adult literacy. She's currently writing the Sherlock Holmes Bookshop series for Crooked Lane, the year-round Christmas mysteries for Penguin Random House, the Tea by the Sea mysteries for Kensington, and under the name Eva Gates, the Lighthouse Library series for Crooked Lane Books. Vicky lives and writes in bucolic Prince Edward County, Ontario. Her work's been nominated for the Derringer, the Bonnie Blythe, the Ontario Library Association Golden Oak, and the Arthur Ellis Awards. She's the recipient of the 2012 Derek Murdoch Award for Contributors to Canadian Crime Writing, and her website is vickydelaney.com. So again, in the interest of showing love for and support for Vicky, here's just a shot of Vicky's picture and some of her books. And now I'm going to bring all the other guests back up onto the stage. You can please join me back. Guys, thank you so much. It was really amazing readings. I really loved hearing that. And I'm inviting anyone from the audience, if they have any comments, that would, Graham suggesting she could do audio only, even phone in. But I guess, we're doing this on the fly, Graham. We're doing our best. So I want to invite. There's some weird noise in the background. I'm not sure where that's coming from. It's not one of my animals making the noise.
Not mine.
No? That's a weird sort of. Is Graham making the noise? No, I'm just kidding. So it was weird. It just sounded like something was collapsing or whatever. But anyways,
Sorry, that might have been on my end.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. It's all good. Everything's okay, right? Like there's no like weird weather conditions or anything.
No, it was a bag being opened.
It's been that kind of summer, right? Murder hornets and in terms of we talked earlier about, I mean, we're all a little bit sad that we can't be hanging out at the Delta in Calgary. It's always such a wonderful opportunity. We would have been at the Calgary Public Library gorgeous. How many of you guys have been to that location that was normally held?
Not yet.
Oh, I did. The new one had just opened, 2 years prior to the pandemic, and we got a chance to check that out. In terms of when you're, I'm gonna kind of riff off of Fonda. So she's got the book coming out in a few months and a reading. When I was at my very first When Words Collide, Brandon Sanderson had read from a book he hadn't even turned into his editor yet, so it was even further away from getting published. And I remember sitting there and going, oh my God, when is this book coming out? Because he read this introductory passage, and it wasn't until probably a year or so later before I had the honor of getting to read it. What's that experience like as an author? Do you like Fonda, was it kind of like, ooh, you picked that because that was a really great introduction, right? Because it was the legacy, it was the introduction of the characters. Are there other factors in why you might want to decide to, read something that's not yet available for people?
Well, personally, I think one of the nice things of going to an author reading is that you get something a little special, like something different than what you would necessarily get if you just pick their book right off of the shelf and turn to page one. So I often do feel like it's a nice introduction to an author when they're reading something that is not publicly available yet. The other thing to remember is that we authors are working like a year in advance of the publication process, and so where my mind is months to a year beyond what's going on with the book. So by the time the book is actually published, you're like, oh yeah, that book. Like it's, you kind of, what is freshest in your mind is what you've worked on more recently, and so it's great. I actually think it's very mentally helpful because when you first turn in, when you finally finish the book and it goes off to your editor and then copy editor and proofreader, you're just sick to death of it. Like you're like, get this out of my face. I never want to read this again. Like, thank God it is done. And then by the time it comes out, like 6 months to a year and a half later, you're like, oh yeah, I really like that story. And like, you're ready to talk about it again and market it again. So, I'm working on but having something that is like, that's sort of new and fresh and contained and that you can share at a reading is always nice.
Anyone else want to comment on that? Because I do like what you said about the fact that it's something that they're not going to get anywhere because it's not available. So it makes that reading special. Any other sort of thoughts on that, guys?
Well, I said that I picked something old because I was just used to reading it, and my next book doesn't come out till January. And now I'm second guessing myself. Thanks, Fonda.
Well, no, but the benefit. Let's talk about the pros and cons. So, Morgan, you read something because you knew it really, really intimately and had practiced it in front of audiences, so you knew it resonated, right? So you had that coming in.
This is true. And also, I thought about the new book, and I haven't decided on what would be, because I haven't really shared very much online, because like only reviewers are only starting to get it and whatnot. So I haven't had a lot of feedback on what was like really a dynamic scene. So yeah, and then the new year when it comes out, and hopefully I'll be able to do some in-person stuff. I'll definitely, I won't be reading any 8-year-old material then, or maybe I will be. I don't know.
I think so much depends on the situation. I mean, I've got to be honest, it's wonderful to be here as a guest, but I have to assume that quite a lot of people watching this have never read any of my books or a Kate Morgan mystery. Right? And I think, therefore, starting at the beginning, which is what my reading was, hopefully it'll give them an introduction to the characters, the tone, the nature of the book, so that they can work out whether it's their cup of tea or not, really. The other thing is, given that I read from my first book on purpose, I'm sure you all feel the same thing. Your first book, my first book, was something I'd cogitated upon for years, and probably my best and most detailed developed plot, characters, and so on. So if there's a truth in the author that's going to come out in their writing, I think that truth often comes out in their first novel, which is something that's been a part of their life for so long, a part of their dreams. It's the whole thing that's driving us forward. Not to say that the ones that follow are not the truth of the author, but I think depending on the circumstances, I might choose to go, here's the new book, have a sneak peek, which I love, by the way, to be in at the kill, pardon the pun, or just going back to the beginning.
That's a good point. Yeah. Because the first book, we didn't have deadlines and we were writing it for ourselves. So it was kind of like, it's almost like a pure piece of art, darlings. So yes.
Oh, yes.
I'm just popping up this comment from Online for Authors. We get to know the author better regardless of what you select. So thank you for selecting what you did, because there was a reason behind it, obviously, and it is a great insight into the author regardless. So that's really cool. Cathy, can I ask the difference between reading for an audiobook and reading for a live audience? Are there things that you change up?
Personally, no. I don't know whether you've noticed, but I use my hands a lot when I talk and when I read, apparently. Even when I'm reading in the studio. Even when I'm reading in the studio, there are photographs that were taken of me in the studio recording, and my little hands are flapping about as though there's somebody actually paying any attention to me other than hourly. Personally, no. Although what I will say was, for the audiobook, I had rehearsed the slight changes in voices that I was going to use for the different characters. I'm not able to do wonderful accents, and many of the characters are male, of course, but it was important that the listener had the right tone of voice being used. So if I were to say Chuck Damcott whined, I would, in my big print version, have written use whiny voice above the speech before the descriptor came at the end of the speech, so that I read it correctly, if you see what I mean. So that I was always ahead, because you know what it's like, you'll write a bit of speech, then a descriptor, and by then you've used the voice, so it's kind of too late and you've killed it. So I did do that, so it was preparation rather than necessarily doing anything different, but you get into those characters and those voices when you're doing it for 10, 11, 12 hours or 3 days in the studio, which is different when nerves creep in for a 10-minute reading, where it's a bit more flash and you're done.
Also, in the studio, you have the beauty of sound editing.
Yes. And he would sometimes say, oh, hang on a minute, let's go back and do that again. And I think, yes, you're quite right. And yes, you do have that delightful opportunity to do things right for the 10th time.
Now, Stina, just before the session started, we were talking about the fact that you had some sweet romance titles that were written under a different name.
Yeah.
How important is brand? I mean, and this is for you, Stina, but also others who have written different genres under different names. How is that a thing, like for expectations and readers?
Well, the reason I fought against having a pen name for the longest time. I didn't think I needed it. I thought that readers know enough and they're smart that they would know that if they picked up one book compared to another, it'd be a different genre. It took my editor and my publisher and my agent and other friends and even readers to pound into me that there is an expectation when it comes to names with genres. So I went for all my sweet romance or my sweeter contemporaries. They're under Stina Marie, which is it's a softer name compared to Steena Holmes, which does the, dark family secrets, the psychological thrillers, that type of thing. They're different books, right? And keeping those reader expectations and knowing what the experience I want my readers to have, it made a lot of sense to go towards a different name. I think I was mentioning to you before, I have a book that's out on submission, and it is very different And I have been advised, and I will finally listen faster than before. It should have a different name to it, just because it is very, very different than what I've written before, what my readers are expecting from me. So in order not to break the confidence, not to break, a brand is a promise that you make to your readers, right, of what they can expect from you in their experience. And so in order not to break that promise, I will finally do what I'm told.
Yeah, for me, it's, I mean, coincidentally, there may be a few of my titles on my shelf. I don't know why they're face out, but they are. And hold on, let me get it right. It's Fallen Kingdoms. You can see it's very Game of Thronesy. That's Morgan Rhodes. And my first book, hold on, it's like mirror image. So I'm going to try to, it's right here. This one was my first book, is Michelle Rowan. You can see Game of Thrones, chick litty vampire holding a martini glass. So I probably wouldn't go with the same name for both, because they have completely different feels. And if you've read Fallen Kingdoms, you might like Bitten and Smitten, but you might not, and it might turn you off this. And so there was a clear line between my two, but I did keep the same initials, so it didn't screw me up too much.
Yeah, I think keeping a name that's similar, so that, you know, your readers know Steena Holmes, Steena Marie, Steena Jack, whatever.
Right.
They know the difference will be the genre.
It's not a secret.
Right. And then when they go and they look on Indigo, or they go to the library and they try and look it up, or they go like elsewhere and they put in your name, hopefully your other names will pop up, right, if it's done correctly.
Right.
The algorithms and all that other fun stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah. Do you find that there's any crossover? Do you hear from readers that they've read everything?
That's actually quite funny. My majority of my readers came from my women's fiction, and then I gently brought them over to psychological thrillers. They do not go to my sweet romance or my sweet contemporaries, but those who find me from the Steena Marie, they have no problem jumping over to read the other books. So it is quite different. It's something I didn't expect.
Wow. That's fascinating. I want to bring Dave into the conversation, just as someone's bringing something to Dave. But
sorry,
the waiter brought you something.
Yes.
There. Dave, having worked in bookstores, what makes a successful author event at a bookstore?
Oh wow. I think the most important thing is just the engaging with customers. Like we've had some where, you know, the people are really introverted and they don't want to talk. And that doesn't really work, because nobody will approach them if they look like they don't want to be approached. And then you have the opposite end, where they're like standing at the door, greeting everybody and saying, "Come and talk to me about my book." And that can sometimes turn people off. It really is. And there's every type of event in between. But I think it's just, if you look approachable and you're willing to talk about your book and give people some information about your book, without saying you have to buy this today or whatever. That's kind of the big thing. We don't really do too many. At least I'm not involved in events that much, but when I do like work with stores to get stock for them or whatever, most of the events that I've seen in my stores, they don't really do readings, mostly because the stores are so big. It's not really the best. You know, if there was a quiet place in some stores, we sometimes do that. But I know in one of the stores I used to work in, we had a closed community room where people could do readings, and that worked. But when you're in a big open space, most authors don't want to do that anyway. So really, it's just about having conversations with people as they go by, and if they're interested in the look of the book, or they ask you questions, you know, just being able to tell them a little bit about the book, a little bit about yourself. Most customers actually love meeting actual authors, real live authors. So it really is all about your personality more than anything. And having a great cover doesn't hurt either.
Of course, that never hurts. So
Yeah.
I have to ask the authors, since the pandemic, how many virtual events for bookstores or libraries have you had the opportunity to participate? Because I imagine you haven't had a chance to do many in person since maybe March of 2020. Have you been able to do virtual events with libraries, bookstores, etc.?
I have done quite a few virtual events. More often, like oftentimes an author will be launching a book, and it's great to have like a conversation partner for some of those launches. So I've done some launch events with other author friends who've had their books launch. This November, when my book comes out, we'll see what the world will be like. I'm still fingers crossed that stores will be open and we'll be able to do events in person, because I really want to. But we'll have to see how things shape out. I think that there's definitely benefits and disadvantages to doing the virtual events. On the plus side, I've had a lot more international bookstore events where I've been able to like do an event with an author who lives in like Britain, or like do an event for a bookstore in Amsterdam, and like the authors are from like 3 different continents, and that's been cool because you're reaching readers that you would never really get to meet in person otherwise. And on the other hand, I think we all have a lot of Zoom fatigue, and people are in front of their screens all day. It is, going out to a bookstore to hang out with your friends and to see an author speak is more compelling, and it's going to be more fun than being like, oh, log into Zoom again. So they also tend to potentially cannibalize each other, because ordinarily on a book tour, you'd be stopping in different cities. You'd get to have a different audience, different bookstore each night. And, it's harder to do that in a virtual format, because there's not really anything to differentiate one virtual event from another. So I'm hoping, though, that some of the great things about doing virtual events will kind of carry forward, and that eventually we'll be in a place where we can do kind of a hybrid model where as an authors, we still get to come back to do the in-person events that we love to do and meet readers in person, but also I think bookstores now know how to do virtual events. Like now we could do them more often than we did before.
Yeah, I love that international aspect of the being able to, oh my God, this author is speaking in Portland, for example, and it's like, but I can't get to Portland, but I can at least see them. Although the books on the shelf behind me, these whole 2 shelves are mostly signed copies from my time, because again, even though I read most of my stuff in ebook format lately or audiobook, I then want to have the hard copy, especially if I get the chance to get the author's signature in that. To me, there's still nothing like that intimate connection.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure Dave could speak to this, but I feel like the in-person event brings people into the store where they're much more likely to then not just buy the author's book, but be like, hey, now that we're here, like, let's browse and like pick up 3 or 4 other books. And with that, it's just hard on the virtual event, because you can post the buy here link, but that's no easier than going to Amazon, right? And I would much rather that purchase go to my local independent bookstore.
That's totally true. And in fact, I have some good news. We have been able to do, we have some events planned, some in-person events planned, following very strict safety measures. Even though we don't really need to in Alberta, we're doing some, thanks to our government, we are doing some very specific events towards the end of this month and in September that are home office planned, in Calgary and Vancouver, specific stores, just a couple of test stores, before we actually roll out the ability to go back to the way it was before, where stores and authors can work together to just set up events really anytime. But that's not going to happen. Probably not until the new year, mostly because we're starting off where we're allowed to do events in Vancouver and Calgary. And then maybe a little bit in Atlantic Canada, but I haven't heard of what the timelines are yet. We just had a guidelines, internal guidelines for stores go out, I think, just the other day. So I haven't had a chance to look at it, but hopefully that'll be soon. But normally we don't do events in like after, oh, there's one of my cats. Normally we don't do events like after the Black Friday, Cyber Monday weekend through to the end of Boxing Week, really. Right. So the planned events that we have are probably just going to be September, October, and then we won't, and then it'll shut off, and then probably we'll be able to do something after Christmas. So looking forward to that for sure.
I'm in Calgary and I cannot wait for that to happen. So where can I find out information so I can go to an actual bookstore and see an event happen in person?
I think there are actually some Calgary events planned already. They should be on our site. There is an events page on indigo.ca and they should be there. I believe they would be posted there. So
perfect.
Yeah, so Calgary, I think it's the Signal Hill store and the Chinook location in Calgary, and then in Vancouver it would be the Granville and the Robson locations, which are like close to downtown in Vancouver.
Awesome.
Those are the test stores where we're going to start doing them. So
I have a question from Kira for Morgan. It says, Morgan loves your books. The heroes grow and become wonderful. Magnus. The villains are so vile. Aaron. Invoking hatred. Do you decide in advance how characters should be viewed, or do they evolve?
That's a really good question. Thank you, Kira. It depends on the character for me. I don't know about the rest of you, but some characters I planned out ahead of time and others surprised me. A couple characters, if anyone is familiar with my series, I enjoy killing characters and not just the bad ones. So just random murders, good YA fare. And
where the Game of Thrones comparison comes in.
Yeah, probably that. Yeah. Mine wasn't quite as violent, but definitely surprise murders and nobody was safe. But there's a couple characters I can think of, and I won't mention them by name because the spoilers for later on in the series, but one of them I did plan to kill. And he was just so delightful on the page. I'm like, he just didn't want to die. So I'm like, okay, you can stay. And then he became a viewpoint character in a later book. So that was a rare occurrence. Usually I will wrangle them and I'll say, this is your arc and this is what I've planned. Because I'm what's called a plotter. Some people are called pantsers because they write by the seat of the pants. They sit down and they're like, I have a general idea. And then they just write the whole book. And I'm like, this is what happens in chapter 1. This is what happens in chapter 2. So to stick to my schedule, I need to follow that because I spend a lot of time up front. So my characters usually mind their manners. A couple times, especially with Magnus, like the love interest and whatnot, shifted a bit from what I originally planned, but it was all for the best.
I saw Cathy raise her hand when you talked about plotters. So obviously, Cathy and Morgan are in the plotter camp.
Yeah.
We're control freaks.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Stina,
when I
Fonda,
used to write,
are you either or?
I'm a plotter as well.
Yeah.
I'm definitely a plotter, but my outline is more of a rough guide. I don't think I can think of any time when I wrote an outline and then actually stuck to it perfectly. So I'm very much a plotter who is most likely going to change something along the way.
Well, Vonda, that means you're in a plantster. You're a plotter, plantster.
A plotster.
I'm more of a headlight writer.
Okay.
So I have a general idea of what I want to happen. I usually know how my book starts and I know how I want it to end, but how I'm going to get there, I have no idea. So I'm scene by scene. As far as I can see, that's as far as I write.
Wow.
And I need to wait for it to tell me what happens, where the characters want to go.
Wow.
If I'm the type of author who, if I know what happens, so if I plot out the story in advance, which is really hard when you work with a publisher, having to provide that plot. If I know in advance what happens to the story, I'm bored. I don't want to write it because it's not exciting for me. I don't have that experience that I'm going to a reader would have reading the book. It's already written in my head and there's nothing for me there's no surprises. Even if I don't need to go by the plot and I can change it, in my head, I still know that it's already done. It's already written. And I can't do it. I struggle.
That's amazing. I mean, it's so, I mean, I get it. Like, I hear what you're saying, and on one level I understand, but at the other, like, my reaction is like, how do you do that? Because for me, I feel like I don't even know if I would even start writing if I didn't feel like I had a plan, because otherwise it would just seem like massively overwhelming. And for me, the joy is in kind of having that plan and then making the plan come into reality.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing that we all write differently, and we can all, there's not one way to write a book, that everyone can find a means, a way that makes it possible for them to write that story, and that there's no success, there's no failures, there's no you have to do it one way or another, that in the end, as long as you get that story written, right?
Yeah. And Stina, I have to say, I'm a pantser myself, but I've never heard that term, headlight writer, or how'd you describe it again? With
I can only see as far as my headlight goes, right? So I can only see a certain distance of what's going to happen, and then after that, I have no idea.
Yeah, because that happens to me. As I know roughly how I think it's going to end. That may change because the characters may have different ideas, or the headlights may steer me in a different direction, and then I just go. And Cathy's having a stroke just thinking about it.
They're not in charge. They're not in charge.
You know, I was actually saying something in my masterclass earlier today about how I think that dichotomy of plotting versus pantsing is kind of overblown, because every established, like, veteran author that I know has learned to work on across that spectrum. And it's not like you're in this camp or this camp. It's more like, here's the spectrum of how well planned you are before you begin. And like, you could fall on like a different place in that spectrum, even project to project sometimes.
Yeah.
And I've described myself as a plotter, but I have learned to be much more flexible and to kind of follow my instincts when I'm writing. And I know plenty of pantsers or headlight writers who have been under strict deadline and they have to produce an outline, and so like they pick up that skill set as well.
I'm one of those. 9 books with my publisher, I had to produce a plot for them, but there was always the understanding that I'm going to veer off in a different direction, and even during edits it would be, that's not what we discussed, and I'm like, I know, but it works so much better this way.
It's funny, before I even sit down at my laptop, I've seen the whole movie in my head. That's where I start. I do my plotting in my head as though it's a movie, moving scene by scene forward. I get to the end of the movie, then I can write my outline, then I can write my chapter outlines, but I've already seen the movie, and then my job is to get that movie onto the page without the words getting in the way for the reader. So my hope is that people experience the book rather than read the book. Does that make sense?
And I want to experience the book as I'm writing it, just like I want readers to experience as they read it.
Yeah. And the wonder is we're all different. And so long as it works for us and our readers, we're all doing it right.
Right.
That's true.
That's right. There's no wrong way to write a book.
Yeah.
As Online for Authors says, all authors are truly amazing. And you guys are truly amazing. Thank you so much for giving your time to share. So obviously the wonderful live audience, thank you guys so much. And if you're watching this in the future, you can still enjoy it in the future, like a great book that you haven't read yet. And you can check out all of these authors, great books. You can actually, if you want more from them, you can, I believe, still register for free to When Words Collide, to participate in so many of the different things they're going to be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and that's at whenwordscollide.org. So again, thank you guys so much for such an entertaining, and here's the thing is, like, I just want to keep talking to you guys about writing, and I'll probably keep you here for hours, but I know you've had long days already, some of you, and some of you are about to embark on really long days starting tomorrow. So thanks so much for taking the evening with me, and I want to wish everyone a wonderful evening wherever you happen to be.
See you,
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
See you tomorrow.
See you at the bar.